kind of, we're happy to be back.
Whee!
Woo! Yay! We sound boring. Anyway, just to kind of wrap things up and kind of get things going, we're going to be trying to do these again once a week. It'll be probably a little bit different from week to week, and we're going to be kind of zeroing in on the format. So don't worry about that. It's all good. So basically, let's begin with what have we been playing this week. I'm going to start with me because I'm boring. I pretty much have been waiting, getting the parts, and kind of setting up my brand new desktop this week. So not really gaming for me, anything. Just been setting up. I expect next time I'll be doing a lot of gaming, and I can talk a lot about that. Eddie!
I have been both fighting and getting my butt kicked by Dark Souls.
How's
That's been
that feel?
entertaining. That's been entertaining to people who I've been in Skype calls with. Because, if anything, the Capra Demon, or Capra, or however the heck you say it sometimes, Demon is a butt. I hate him. Ooh, that battle. Was able to get my hands on some League of Legends this week. A little bit of Gauntlets. I played just a little bit of it because I bought it the other day. Played some Hearthstone. Let's see, what else? And I believe that's about it for me.
Yeah, I mean, not bad. It's Capra Demon, that thing at the beginning of the game?
Mm-mm.
Oh.
It's a different demon entirely, and his battle arena is very small.
Okay, so
And you have...
I've only,
I was actually...
I've only played like 3 hours in the game, so yeah.
Yeah, you played 3 hours into the game. This is for me, it was about 10 hours into the game.
Okay,
Because
something to look forward to. Yay!
it is very much a asshole fight, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yep. Well, if you couldn't tell, it's just me and Eddie this week. But yeah, we'll kind of shuffle things around week to week. So yeah. Moving on, let's just move on to the main topic of discussion because we have a lot to talk about here, and it's kind of perfect that it's just me and you, Eddie, because having done the expansion previews before, this is kind of perfect because we can kind of take up the time here. So I'm just going to lay down essentially some of the terminology I'm going to be using. I meant to actually talk to you about this before we started, but essentially I'm going to be pretty much talking about, in general, they're going to be called sets, and then the different sets, there are expansions and adventures. That way I don't call everything expansions and get all confusing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we should probably start with I'd say, I don't want to say the elephant in the room because that's something else, but let's just start with the one thing everybody wants to hear about right before we get into the deep stuff. We are getting new card slots, and we are talking about the new Hearthstone, of course, announcement. But we are getting 9 new card slots for a total of 18 card slots. And pretty much, if you have unlocked all the cards for every hero, you pretty much are going to be getting those slots. Eddie, thoughts?
Yay! I don't have to keep sitting around trying to go, well, I don't want this deck anymore, I don't want that deck anymore. I can actually start going, okay, well, I have all these slots to myself now, and just go, and start experimenting more and more. I've got more... I'm trying to find the word for it.
Freedom?
Freedom is a word. It's freedom of... experimentation, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm super duper ready for this because it's going to be such a great thing for us to have.
Yeah.
As people who, to where, like, we've been so constricted before just with those 9 deck slots. It's like, there are so many ideas and so many just different things that you would want to try, and it's like, oh, I have this really good deck that I like having together, and I don't want to deconstruct it. But there's this new idea that I want to try, and then, like, if this deck is bad, it's cut it out, and, because,
Yeah, I totally get that. And I think that was one thing I told you from day one when I started playing Hearthstone is I felt that there were not enough deck slots. I pretty much hit my max very early on. So I'm kind of happy. I think 18 is actually a very, very good number. I have a hard time really seeing us. I really have a hard time seeing anybody really maxing out on 18 and saying, I need more deck slots. Because even though that we would talk, and we would talk a lot about, especially in the previews, especially when we looked at new cards coming out, we always talked about, this gives me an idea, or this I can see this deck. I kind of want to experiment a little bit with this. But again, because the card slots, you really never wanted to delete something a deck that you really, really liked. And I really like that this will give us the freedom to kind of be a little bit more creative. Now, unless you have something else to say, I want to go into a little bit of a wild idea here. So, do you have anything more to say about the deck slots, or?
As far as I'm concerned, I've got nothing more.
Yeah. I actually thought, 18 is actually a nice number. I really don't think that they need to expand any more past that. But if they did, Eddie, I'm going to give them the perfect number for maximum deck slots ever and leave it be. If they want to do it, 30. Hear me out, okay, before you say I'm crazy. Make all the other ones unlockable rewards. You can only get the rest. Basically, 18 everybody's going to have. But but if you want to make 30 basically the max deck slot, never give them any more deck slots ever again. 30 is your max. These deck slots would be a nice reward, and here's how you do it. You give them 9 each for a total of 27. They get a deck slot for every single time they get a golden hero. So if you get all 9 golden heroes, you have 9 new deck slots. That's 27. The last 3, we're going to be going more into these later. Make them like actual major rewards. So let's say getting legendary standard, getting legendary wild, which we've talked about. I forget what the 30th one is, but I'm sure you can come up with something very creative. Basically making it a hard goal and making players strive for them. And people who are able to accomplish that will have 30 deck slots. I don't think you ever need to go past that. And for me, it's a nice round number. It was driving me nuts just being 18. But I think as far as actual expanding room, 18 is enough, and more than that would be more than enough. But just an idea to throw that out there. But
what I was saying is, because I mean, like, you've got basically what I can see where you're kind of going with it. You have 30 deck slots. You have basically 30 cards in the deck. Ta-da, logic.
Yeah, well, I figured, like, if, you got a deck slot as a reward for getting a golden hero. Max golden heroes is 9 deck slots. That's 27. It's just 3 away from 30.
Yeah.
And so you could pretty much, like I said, you could pretty much find 3 goals to basically hide those last 3. Actually, I remember what that 30th slot was. Reward somebody for max wins in arena for the first time.
Yes, the 12 wins.
Yeah, 12 wins in arena, you get a deck slot.
That's not a. That's really really a good idea. Well, I would say a really good idea because it's like it's something that with Hearthstone there is that bit of struggle bus in a sense because really what you're trying to do is you're trying to play for these you're trying to play for gold. and open packs, get cards, and that's basically it.
Let's reward players for achieving something for the first time. Let's really reward players. And I think a deck slot is a good way to do that. Have deck slots as rewards. And I think, like I said, 30 deck slots is enough, and those are some adequate rewards, and they are difficult rewards. And not only would it feels so great. Not only did you actually achieve that, but you get a deck slot as a reward, so you get to experiment more with your decks.
Mm-hmm.
Will it happen? I doubt it, but I think it would be a great way for deck slots in the future. And pretty much like I said, 30 would be the max, and they never have to mess with it again. Ever. But yeah, I'm happy that we're getting an additional 9 deck slots.
Yep.
But I kind of want to start with that because the rest of the announcement is the major news. It's kind of like, they kind of announce this and like, oh yeah, you're getting more deck slots. I wanted to kind of reverse it so that we talked about the deck slot, which we've always wanted, and then delve into actually the major meat of the announcement. And so if you don't mind, Eddie, I'm actually just going to announce the things, and then we discuss them.
After you, my good sir.
Okay. So, the major announcement is that they are shaking up the way Hearthstone is essentially going to be played. They are going to be starting with, in the spring, with the next expansion. They are going to be splitting Hearthstone into 2 different type of formats. Standard, which only uses standard format and wild format. Standard format only uses the sets for the past 2 years, starting 2 years, and wild uses pretty much every card ever. And of course, standard always will include basic and classic, which means that when they start off when standard format is introduced and they start off the new standard season, the Naxxramas and the Goblins vs. Gnomes sets will no longer be eligible for play in standard. So there will be wild only. Not only that, but the Naxxramas Adventure and the Goblins vs. Gnomes packs will no longer be sold in the store. You can, however, craft those cards or dust the cards. Even the adventure cards, which you couldn't before. And even now, starting with new adventures, starting with this, any adventure, you can actually craft or dust those cards, which is actually great. But yeah, there's a whole lot of, and we're going to get more into this. Eddie's going to be tackling it from the Hearthstone meta competitive angle, and I'm going to be likening this to other competitive card games like Magic the Gathering. So yeah, Standard is pretty much a more limited format, and Wild is anything goes. And there are reasons we're going to kind of get into that. Eddie, I know you want to talk.
Yeah. Well, no. What I was going to say is I'll also probably join somewhat a little bit with the Magic the Gathering side of things because of being around it enough times with people down on campus and whatnot. But,
Yeah.
Go.
I remember when Hearthstone made this announcement, I remember looking at the reactions on Twitter and on the Hearthstone website, and fans just were going nuts. There were a lot of fans who didn't like this, and there were multiple reasons. Essentially the blah blah blah, it's getting ruined, whatever. But there are some very, very interesting things with this. And personally, I'm just going to say it. I expected this to happen sooner or later, because if you want to the long-term health of a game like this, you really need to do something with these formats. It's something Magic the Gathering did years ago. They have their standard format, which basically it covers 2 years, and then they have what is known as Legacy, and this is essentially it. This is Standard and Legacy on Hearthstone, and basically with Wild and Legacy mode, nothing is going to change. Anything goes. But Standard is basically going to have a rotation of cards that it rotates out at the spring of every year with the first new expansion of the year. And then they'll pretty much assign a new animal sign for that year. The animal sign starting when Standard comes out will be Kraken, so we're going to be entering the year of the Kraken. I'm not sure whether you want to talk more about what you think, Eddie, because I know there's a lot of things I want to say.
Here's the thing with me, is that on one end, I'm honestly kind of glad that they've allowed for crafting and dusting of some of the adventure stuff that they've put out, because there are a lot of the adventure cards from the Nox Ramus expansion that you don't, excuse me, that you don't even see currently in play. I would say you see about a handful of them, a hand or two handful for that matter, because I mean, let's see, for a definitive, Haunted Creeper, Sludge Belcher, Piloted Shredder came from Goblins vs. Gnomes. Back that up. Mad Scientists are at least like 3 of the biggest cards that I know I see from that expansion. And you can see them almost... you can see at least 2 of them in almost every deck, depending on the deck being played, whether it be like Control Warrior, well, I say Control Warrior, Secret Paladin, Secret Mage, things like that. What I would say the most happy for is the fact that you're taking these cards out of a particular side and style of play to where now people have to be a little bit more crafty with their decks. The thing that I am disappointed with is that you're removing these packs and adventures from the store entirely, because people enjoyed going in and be able to like drop the gold and getting that 1600 dust Dr. Boom, or I'm trying to remember his name off the top of my head, Vol'jin, or just whatever potential legendary or whatever like epic they could get. Now you're having to figure out how much dust you're going to need if you want to play wild format and stay strictly wild to get that card from that set.
Yeah,
that's my biggest gripe.
Yeah, I think that's the gripe that we've heard a lot. It's the fact that that a lot of people are now feeling they've put a lot of effort into making their decks competitive, and now their decks are essentially going to get majorly nerfed. And I think the reason why is because I guess we really didn't mention it yet, is the reason they do this, and if you've played a competitive card game before, you pretty much understood where this was going in the first place. Basically, standard mode is your major competitive mode. That is the mode that is official for all the Hearthstone tournaments. Basically, the cards phase out, and the meta changes essentially constantly every year. And it's going to be moving on. That's going to be the competitive scene. It's no longer anything goes in the competitive scene. Wild is not going to be competitive. It's never going to be competitive. Blizzard just put a stop to that, which means that cards like Dr. Boom are not going to be worth it if you're just trying to play Hearthstone competitively and move up the ladder. And so a lot of people feel ripped off. Another complaint is a lot of people don't like that they are removing them from the store, especially the adventures. And here's the thing: if you bought a wing of the adventure, you could get purchasing the wings even when it goes off the store. But a lot of people are looking at adventures like Curse from Nax Ramus, and they're saying these are great single player experiences, even if they're worthless for Wild. Why take them out? And it's really bothering a lot of people because they don't really see the use of them. They're pretty much just saying, just put up a disclaimer, Wild only or something. And basically, Blizzard's reasoning for removing them is that it would cause too much confusion. Although they have said that they may or may not bring the adventures back to the shop later. Personally, Eddie, I think what this is that they just, in order to do this, they need to rework the shop interface, and they're doing a lot of changes right now, and they're not going to do that.
Yeah. Good chance, maybe.
Yeah. A lot of people also want maybe having something like called a wild pack. Maybe you can't buy the Goblins vs. Gnomes packs, but you can buy a wild pack, and you could get any card from any set or any card from any set that's not standard.
Ooh, that's a. I'd give you an interesting theory on that one.
Yeah. As far as whether that'll happen or not, it's probably going to take a lot of coding, but it would be interesting. Having basically packs that just give you random cards from a multitude of sets would not be bad. And for somebody who collects cards like me, like I just like having one of each card in there. It's going to be a little more annoying filling out the collection because I can't just open packs just to whatever.
Yeah.
So
that is a little bit annoying, but
which is why I'm opening Goblins vs. Gnomes packs until they go bye-bye.
Understandable. I'm just gonna say screw it, save my gold for the new set that's gonna be coming out this coming year.
Yeah.
And something of note, because
if you're going to talk about the next expansion, let's wait till the end because there are some stuff I want to talk about.
No, not at all. Where I was going with that. Where I was going, actually, was we have this new format of standard versus, basically standard and wild. The one place to where people like to kind of sort of funnel themselves in for a challenge and fun is the arena.
Yeah, and actually I was going to mention that. The standard ranked play, there's going to be basically, when split up, there's going to be standard casual and standard ranked, and wild casual and wild ranked. Standard ranked and standard casual play will be the only places in Hearthstone where standard is required. Basically, it's standard only. Everything else is wild. We're not just talking about wild mode. All tavern brawls, unless there are restrictions, and all arena decks are wild. So pretty much, for most of the side is wild, except for the competitive end of it.
Yeah. And we'll get. I'm assuming we're going to get more and more in depth with the basically how things are going to shift.
Yeah.
Meta-wise and everything else.
Yeah, I kind of want to go general to more specific, because there's a lot of things that have been said. There's a lot of things of what people may or may not know, and basically we're going to be speculating. You from the competitive end, me from the what this really means based on other card games like Magic: The Gathering, and I'm going to be making analogies and what I expect to happen. But yeah, and people really freaking out about there's really no need, guys. You're going to play standard, you're going to play wild, some people are going to play both. It's up to you, really. It's up to you. Create the deck you want and then play it in the appropriate mode. One of the announcements are that both, like I said, there will be ranks for both standard and wild. And pretty much to get your 20th level rewards, or basically to get your rewards, you pretty much will be the highest reward in one of them. The level that will be displayed for everybody else will be your standard rank. So for me, they'll probably be looking at my standard rank will be really, really low, but my wild rank may be higher. I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to kind of dabble in both of them. But yeah, pretty much both of them share rewards. And actually, Eddie, I have an issue with that. And can you guess what my issue is?
Okay, I'm going to assume, if I had to take a guess, that there being more focus and incentive toward the standard side than the wild side?
No. And you could probably have guessed what my issue was based on my my little thing of what I would like to be done with deck slots. I like the idea that it doesn't matter which you rank up to 20 to get your card back. Mm-hmm. But I do have a problem with them sharing rewards. Basically, it going off of the highest level of either of them. I think that each of them should have differing values of rewards. I think you should be rewarded for how you rank in both of them. And the main reason why is, here's my thing. It goes down to what I was saying with the card packs, is reward players for doing well. If a player takes the time to do well in both standard and wild, he should be rewarded for his efforts in both of them. not the highest he got overall. And I have a really big problem with that. Yes, and if you're worried about, well, that just means he's doubling up on dust or whatever, why not make the rewards for standard and wild radically different?
You know, that makes a good bit of sense, and I don't mean to cut off your train of thought, but the reason I say that makes a good bit of sense is due to the, as I would of course call it, the struggle. You're playing this game for enjoyment, and there's not really too much rewarding that you get from playing. There's no, I mean, it's like, okay, look at me, I have hit this rank or I hit this part when playing. I mean, I know at the end of the monthly season, it normally says you ranked blah blah blah, then the top blah 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 of players, and it's like you get to rank like 18, and it's like, oh, look at me, I'm in the top 40% of players. I mean, granted, yes, there's millions of players that play, and not everyone's gonna play. Not everyone's gonna play ranked. Not everyone's gonna play arena or whatever. But it's like, if it's that easy to get in the top percentage of a particular set of players, when you only hit like a very small rank, there should be more, at least something more to kind of sort of, for me to sink my teeth into, to want to be passionate about keep coming back and playing.
Yeah. I mean, let's say on standard I made it to rank 18 because I didn't care as much. But for wild, I decided to really push for it. I made it to like rank 11 or 12 or something like that. Instead of rewarding me overall for 11 or 12, I want to be rewarded for hitting 18 as standard. Give me a reward for 18, give me a reward for 11 and 12, and have both wild and standard have different pools of rewards. Have standard have some things that standard only gets as the rewards, have things that only wild gets as rewards. Basically reward players for doing well. Not doing well overall, but doing well if they decide to go both ways. Just overall, just doing well. And that should be a major thought process, is rewarding their players. I'm not talking about minuscule rewards. I'm talking about, stuff like this, and ranked, actually doing well. And I think that's a major failing. I do not like the shared reward system. I really think that there should be separate degrees of rewards. I think that I think the only shared rewards you should get are card backs. Other than that, I think both ladders need separate reward systems. And and to do that effectively, I'd say pretty much mix up what, have wild have something that's unique to its reward system. Maybe if you're talking about wild packs, maybe you can't buy wild packs, but you can earn them as rewards. That'd be perfect because Blizzard is making money off of these packs, off of these cards, but people who are doing well in wild, that's exactly what they want to win. Wild players are going to want to earn dust and old card packs more. And, give an opposite on the other side. Maybe have classic packs be what you win on higher level tiers.
Or
like that.
the new set, maybe.
Yeah, something like that. Mix it up. I really think that there really should be that mindset of, let's reward the players for taking the time to do well in their differing modes, not just a shared prize. Because let's be honest, the amount of skill in wild is going to be radically different than the amount of skill in standard, and so they should not be rewarded the same way.
Fair enough.
That's my one gripe with that system. Do you have any gripes whatever before we actually start delving in to what's actually about to happen?
I've mentioned my gripes. Heck, if anything, you've kind of sort of kidnapped anything words-wise that I could use. So I'm really ready to get my hands on the actual meat and potatoes of this whole big debate.
And as we go into it, let it be known that Eddie is planning on really playing Standard. He's actually starting to call his decks now, and he's going to be playing Standard a lot. I'm going to be the guy playing Wild a lot. So pretty much here's where we're standing. Standard. Yeah, I think the big thing with people looking at Standard is that pretty much it's the way that the decks are phasing out. So they're not going to be using Naxxramas. They're not going to be able to use Goblins versus Gnomes. And because of that, there's been a lot of cards that there have been a lot of decks that dealt with those cards. They're phasing those out. Yeah.
Do you mind if I kind of sort of just rein it in here since I'm doing the Standard thing?
Go.
Alright, so for me, it was right from the get-go. What we see from this whole entire thing, the very first start of this, the very first deck you're going to see basically just kicked as far to the curb as you can as far as Standard play goes, are mechs. Mech decks, no matter what class you decided to go, because I was a connoisseur of the Mech Mage playstyle because it was fun for me, but
And can I interject because
Yes.
I actually know something because I was actually playing just messing around Hearthstone and I just went to casual play for a while. You will not believe when the little bit of time I was in casual play, it seemed that everybody was just trying to get the most use out of their mech decks as possible. I saw mech decks like crazy, like I've never seen before. And I think you have two mindsets right now from this announcement. There are people who are switching to Standard right away, and there are people who are basically just trying to get the last bit of effort and reward that they can out of their soon-to-be defunct decks. And I saw a lot of mech decks. I mean, Eddie, I'm talking about mech deck combinations I never dreamed of. They just start appearing.
Yeah, and that's one of the other crazy things that you'll potentially see between now and spring, and something that you may see more of when you go to play Wild is more of those mech decks because they're going to be specialized for that setting. Who the bloomin' onion? Okay, I'm not responding to that. Anyway. There was the mechs. You could see them in Mage, you could play them in Druid, you could play them in Hunter, you could play them with Priest. Heck, I even watched one of the collegiate tournaments from where they actually played them with Warrior. Shaman was another class that played it, and it's just like you could play them almost anywhere. Now it's like you're taking an entire archetype and just shoving it into one side style of playing, and that's just this start.
Yeah, you want to know another archetype that's about to get shafted?
Okay.
Death Rattle. Death Rattle really came into its own with Naxxramas, and some of the major Death Rattle cards also came from Goblins versus Gnomes. Naxxramas, I know Naxxramas had a lot of sucky Death Rattle cards, but they also introduced Sledge Belcher. They also introduced the Spectral Creeper. They introduced Undertaker, which is a big one for Death Rattle decks, as well as Baron Rivendare. And let's not forget Kalthazad. So your Death Rattle decks, Death Rattle creatures can keep coming back. Naxxramas really elevated the Death Rattle archetype, and that's severely going to die when Standard comes around.
Well, here's the thing, is that for Naxxramas, it really took the competitive play and it brought forth a good chunk of cards that were splashed into decks. Lotheb was one of the biggest cards that was splashed into almost every deck. Because I'm going to drop this whenever I feel like dropping it, and your spells for the next turn cost 5 more, of course. And depending on what turn that gets dropped, that can be an incredible hindrance, or it could be something to where you played it at the wrong time. It was something that you definitely had to play around. Now you're taking that and you're shifting it into only one side of things. I would say it makes Standard more so a bit free to be able to not have to worry as much about that particular card. So it makes for those spell-heavy decks able to play a lot easier without the worry of going, well, crap. You know?
Yeah. And I'm sure you're probably going to go into things we're going to. I think, and I'm going to just say this now. One of the things I had been watching, looking at a lot, as I looked at the extra, had been watching a lot of the extra credit, and this is why it was such a big thing that Blizzard had to do this, and they had to do it now. I had watched some of the extra credit stuff on videos on power creep. Basically, when something is just so powerful, it radically affects the balance in the meta for new cards, so that the power scale just keeps on creeping upward. Kind of want to keep it balanced. And the card used there, it was Piloted Shredder. Piloted Shredder was such a good 4-drop creature that pretty much they either had to balance it by just introducing a lot of creatures just to deal with that, or they had to make all future creatures just as powerful, if not more powerful, which would creep that balance up there. And that is another reason why Blizzard introduced this, was because if they kept on trying to, every single time they expanded, to try to create cards that was balanced with everything else, it would get power creep would be more and more likely, as well as it'd be less likely that new players could really get into it. And with that it becomes less fun, and it would definitely have some hindrance to the creativity that Blizzard could come up with cards. Phasing cards like this out, where cards like this naturally phase out, means that Blizzard gets that sigh of relief. They only have to kind of balance with only a select group of cards, with only their standard set of cards, and they don't have to worry about the power balance like that. Which pretty much means this is going to negate power creep. I mean, you're going to have it kind of spike a little bit in power, but Blizzard doesn't have to worry about it as they once did.
I can agree with you there. Because freaking Piloted Shredder, man, he was a sticky little bugger.
Now, I'm just going to say this for everybody going to Wild. It's everything goes, so
Well, yeah. However,
I'm going to get more into what I think what's going to happen to Wild later, though. I really don't think it's going to be as big a problem as you think. You're saying, Eddie?
Oh no, I was just saying that if anything, that with him, he was just a sticky little bugger.
Oh yeah. I think there was another card. I forget what other card that they threw out there that basically said this one as well. But I remember Piloted Shredder was the big one. But yeah, that's pretty much there. It's everybody who's complaining. It's pretty much it's for the longevity of the game, so that it pretty much keeps you from seeing basically certain cards become the must-have cards, and that's the only way you can be competitive. And it really helps keep the competitive scene fresh, number one. Number two, it helps Blizzard out, because they don't have to worry about balancing for every single pack, every single expansion and set that has ever come out. They only have to worry about a select few sets, and they can. It's easier for Blizzard to control the metagame, which is something that they've really been struggling with as of late. Eddie and I have talked about it a lot. They've been trying to change the metagame, and they've been struggling because of all these different cards out there. So it's going to be easier for Blizzard now to do that.
Well, not only that, but we also take a look at some of the decks that kind of emerged before this whole thing came out. And like with Blizzard and their team of nerf herders, I call them nerf herders because you try to nerf a card and you just kill it. I'm gonna throw out Patron Warrior because of Warsong Commander. Warsong Commander's effect.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm gonna get to that, Eddie, because with what's coming up, I actually don't think that's a bad idea now.
Well, yeah, I get that. However, I was just going to go with what I had now, and
Yeah.
I was going to go back into the what kind of sort of got thrown out at this point, and uh, how things may evolve going forward.
hmm Actually, this might be the perfect time. I know you probably want to talk about a lot of the different cards and decks that won't be applicable, but with a limited amount of time, this might be the best time to talk about what they plan on doing with nerfing.
Well, not nerfing in a sense. I mean, it was just going with mentioning of. I was even just mainly just touching what was going to get basically kind of sort of thrown out. That was it.
Yeah.
On my end, because it was like you with everything has how it has to evolve now, because you do have to evolve with this game at this point.
Yeah. And this was, like I said, this is a smart decision because every single competitive, I'm not sure about, as much about Yu-Gi-Oh, but every single competitive game, like the major ones, like Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, they follow this format and it works out very well for them. And it
Well,
helps keep the game fresh.
what I was going to say is with Yu-Gi-Oh, what they just had to do, and they put it out last Wednesday, and the I would say emergency list had to went live today. They had to, because of a deck being so popular and so highly played in their most recent because of their most recent pack release, they had to do an emergency ban list because of this deck that was 85% played in their competitive environment. They had to go, okay, look, you have all of these cards out here in this daggone metagame, and you're choosing just this thing in specific to splash into practically every single deck you can imagine you can think of possible. No, we have to just crush that into the ground.
Yeah, and I really don't want to get too far off topic, but am I correct in thinking that Yu-Gi-Oh does not have a standard format? It's pretty much all cards are included.
All cards are included.
And see, that's the danger. That's the danger of what happens if if you don't have the standard format. If Hearthstone would have continued to run like it would be, they would have to almost constantly be nerfing cards to keep things like this from happening. And basically, what card games like Magic the Gathering learned was, if we set up a standard, if we basically have a standard format and we have this legacy format, people will play legacy however they want. We don't care. The standard format we can control a little bit more. And if we can control standard format, we do not have to ban cards. We don't have to do it because we're controlling the cards. And, that's why when you go into legacy, there's pretty much, I think there's only one banned card because it's anything goes. And standard is pretty much they've controlled everything so that they don't have to worry about that. It's less work overall for the health of your game.
Yeah.
And that's basically why it's going to work for Hearthstone.
And with Magic, really, with Magic, if they have to ban a card, the only reason that they naturally step in and ban a card in their standard format is if it is incredibly, incredibly busted.
Yeah.
And it's kind of ruining the game state.
Yeah.
So that is the largest reason that the people who oversee Magic the Gathering would have to step in and go, okay, this has got to come out because, no, we can't have this in our game anymore. It's screwing everything up.
Yeah, but pretty much just having a standard mode pretty much alleviates most of the problems, which is why it's going to work for Hearthstone. And do you want to go in more into decks that are going to disappear, or should we use this as a natural extension to kind of go with what I'm talking about with what's going to happen to classic and basic cards?
The only thing I can remotely think of as far as saying that, like, how things will disappear, like I said, the mechs are the biggest thing that will disappear. As far as everything else goes, currently, everything else may just have to evolve in a sense, because with how things are moving, some of the still top tier decks that are in the top tier are still prevalent and relevant. So I'll let you go ahead and start the nerfing discussion.
Okay. Like I said, they're talking about what the cards that are going to be part of Standard, which of course is Grand Tournament, Black Rock Mountain, and of course the newest adventure, the League of Explorers. And this is where I was talking to Eddie about them controlling their metagame, because Eddie and I have felt for a while that Blizzard has been trying to slow the game down, because you have decks like Face Hunter, and all these aggro decks are just basically where it was worth it just to play it fast. And with dragons and with some of the cards in the Grand Adventure, you could see them slow it down. It wasn't working. I think now with Standard, this is going to allow Blizzard to naturally, if they want to control the meta and slow the game down, they can. But more on Classic and Basic. Since Classic and Basic cards are always going to be part of Standard, they've announced that they will be going back and taking a good look at the cards in the Classic and Basic packs or sets, and essentially making changes. What they're saying is they are going to be going back and they are going to be doing massive nerfs. PC Gamer interviewed Ben Brode about a lot of this, and Ben Brode, when asked about how many cards we should expect to be changed, Ben Brode, number one, he says that the group are very conservative about nerfs. However, they're going to take the time now, knowing with what they plan, to make essentially changes to some cards that in Classic and Basic are way, way, way too powerful to continue to be competitive. They say as far as the amount, it's going to be more than 2, less than 20. Some things that were brought out are that there's one class. When you look at the cards given out in Basic and Classic, there's one class that's just way too powerful that anybody who uses this class pretty much rely on these cards. Do you know what it is, Eddie?
I'm gonna be scared and say Mage.
It's Druid.
Oh yeah,
Druid has way too many overpowerful cards. They said they are going to nerf Druid. They're basically going to go and they're going to look at these cards. Now, Eddie, I actually made a mention that I actually think with this announcement, I was with the people who were mad at how Warsaw Commander got nerfed, but actually with this announcement, Eddie, I think it was a terrific nerf. Here's why. Okay, if you're talking about the health of your game, basically Standard mode, and we're going to use Magic the Gathering as our comparison. Every year, Magic the Gathering puts out essentially a yearly card set. It's like the 2015 card set, the 2016 card set. Pretty much, they are cards that are always meant to be your standard cards. And essentially, there are cards that you always notice at Magic the Gathering that always stay in the current meta. Even though a lot of cards get phased out, these cards keep on returning. They are your core cards. And basically, they're introduced. They're introduced in those core sets, starting with the 2015. Like this year would be the 2016 pack, and they also show up in the various different card sets. They're basically creatures and spells that return year after year after year. Core set, and Eddie, that's essentially what Classic and Basic have to be for Hearthstone. And when you look at Classic and Basic like that, what that means are that your effects, the effects of the cards overall, these need to be the absolute basic cards. These are your helping hand cards. These are the core of your game. And none of these cards need to be so overly powerful that they will break the game time after time after time. They can't be so overly powerful that they are going to overshadow cards coming out in new expansions. Now, there's a difference from something like comparing like, and I want to. A lot of people think that, for example, Knife Juggler needs to be nerfed. I disagree. I think Knife Juggler has a pretty good, decent effect. It's essentially a core basic effect that is good in all situations, but it's not overly powerful that it's going to overshadow most of the newer sets. It pretty much just it follows right in that sweet spot, if you understand what I'm saying. And I think this is where I come down to Warsaw Commander. Warsaw Commander had an amazing effect, but it was causing it to kind of overshadow the play of a lot of other cards. And for the fact the matter of Patron Warrior, it really caused that deck to work. When you consider Warsaw Commander's original effect, in terms of it being a core card that would appear like, for example, in a 2016 pack, Eddie, that's a very powerful effect. You did not want that effect. However,
which effect again?
Basically allowing minions with 3 or more to immediately gain charge.
Yes.
For
Now,
a core card, that was a way too powerful an effect. However,
yes, it was.
having it boost up charge creatures is a lot better. So now, considering standard, that Warsaw Commander nerf makes sense. It didn't make sense at the time. It makes a lot more sense now. I'm going to, and pretty much I think when they're going to go nerf cards, they're going to be looking at that. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of epic and legendary level classic cards that are pretty powerful, but they're about middle of the road. They're about middle of the road when it comes to your normal legendary epic cards. So I don't think they're going to get nerfed too much. So don't worry about me saying, oh, they're going to depower all the legendaries. I don't think so. I think they're going to leave the legendaries alone, except for one. I think it's Nose Dormu. I think they really need to change Nose Dormu.
They need to fix that damn card.
I don't think they need to fix it. I think
when I say fix it, I mean make it to where my opponent's turn, the timer doesn't pour into my turn.
I think it was a great. I think they had a lovely idea, but I think just the timer effect doesn't work. Here's how I recommend fixing Nose Dormu. But because before, the reason why it messed with both timers was because there was it was eliminating your opponent, but it also bit you too. I think what it needs to it needs to be an effect that the effect is that your opponent can only use like 5 mana crystals. Basically, they can only use a small portion of their mana crystals. It locks off the other ones. But the effect is when it enters in, it locks off yours for 1 turn. It locks off so many of yours for 1 turn. Essentially, giving it a what's the name? It begins with no.
What's the effect?
It locks off mana crystals, Eddie.
I know it locks on mana crystals. It's like, crap.
I think it's
Overload.
Overload. I think here's my suggestion. Changing Nose Dormu's effect from basically each player has 15 turns or 15 seconds to play their turn. Change this effect to basically Overload 5. Your opponent only has 5 mana crystals max. Basically heavily locking. It has a similar effect. Something along those lines. And this does one of 2 things. Number 1, it gets rid of the terrible timer restriction, which basically was a better idea in concept than it was in practice. But it also does what Nose Dormu does best, which is limiting what your opponent can do. Overload does the same thing to you when you immediately play it. So on your next turn, you're limited. So basically, there's a risk-reward situation there. Another thing that this would do, Eddie, would be to introduce Overload to basic cards.
It very well could do it to basic cards and kind of sort of open it up more so to...
Because I always wondered why Overload mechanic that was Shaman only. Magic the Gathering really doesn't have a lot of... card games like Magic the Gathering really doesn't have mechanics like that are only limited to a certain type of card. So,
well, no.
I felt that they needed to introduce Overload to the general populace eventually, and I think reworking Nose Dormu to basically have it be an Overload creature that locks up some of your opponent's mana crystals would be a brilliant idea.
It could be. However, that isn't up to us. That is up to the people at Blizzard now for
I'm
something
pretty much
of...
throwing out an idea. I'm also going to throw... Sorry. Did I miss...
I'm going to say, you keep doing it! You've done it twice now. I'm just like...
Sorry.
For Overload, it is something that was class-specific to Shaman. Now, it is something that you could introduce to the general populace of everyone who would potentially want to play a specific card and have it been Overload cost. Now, it could be paid off through Shaman, because Shaman has the 2 cost.
You're
I
talking
think
lava burst, right?
I was. I knew it was lava. I didn't know if it was lava shock or lava burst. I was like, want to make sure I have my wording right.
It might be lava shock. No, it's lava shock.
Okay, lava shock, to where it's, oh, I'm gonna get rid of all these locked mana crystals now. I'm happy and feeling good
Yeah,
because I no longer have locked crystals.
yeah. I think. Did I interrupt you again?
Oh no, actually, I was
I think what was it? Overturn?
over.
Overload. Yeah, I think overload needs to be introduced to basically just be a basic mechanic that could be on any card, and but I think it would probably still be more heavily in Shaman. But I just think it needs to be introduced out there in general because there's really no reason for it to be a Shaman only mechanic,
Yeah.
and basically nerfing doing this no nose Dormu would be a perfect way to do it.
Now, what other than Nose Domaru, what are you seeing potentially getting the nerf?
I'm like I said, I pretty much like I said. I think the standard for basically nerfing and changing classic and basic cards is essentially looking at them as, if these are the core cards that you don't want them to be too overly powerful, based on blah 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 blah, to overshadow any card. What cards do you really need to consider? What cards you would nerf this every card? No Stormer, I think, just needs to be fixed, and basically that means I think No Stormer just needs a new effect to basically have the same spirit of the card, but also to make it more viable. We know that
Okay.
Druid is going to be nerfed, but I think there's one card, and you're going to know one card that I think really needs to be nerfed, and we would probably see nerfed because it's just way too powerful of a card for a classic, and that is Frothing
Alright.
Berserker. As a core card, Frothing Berserker is way too powerful for Classic in Standard mode. We're talking about a card that just gets more powerful as people get damaged. Eddie, that is not a core card, that is an expansion card. Frothing Berserker, that effect would work better in a new expansion than it works for a core card that is always there. So Frothing Berserker needs to be nerfed.
I'm gonna disagree with you on that one because he is, depending on the I say depending on the deck, because he's a 2/4 to start. With how I say with how easily you can basically just get rid of him, because you can spell and just kill it. Just easy as can be. You can throw up your taunt creatures that will allow you to lock the field if need be, and it makes sure where your opponent has to play around the Berserker itself and keep it alive.
I think what you're doing is you're misunderstanding what I'm actually saying.
Okay.
I'm not saying that the effect is bad. That it's a bad, too powerful card. It needs to be nerfed because of that. I'm saying that as a classic card, as a core card that is always going to be part of the metagame, I think it's too powerful for class. I think it's too powerful for a standard to always be there like that. I think a card like that is perfect for a new set. Basically, that's only going to be there for a short time. It's powerful. It's powerful, but it's eventually going to leave the metagame. For it to always be there, I think is very dangerous. I think it's effects that need to just not be in Classic. That's why I gave the example of Magic the Gathering's core card. These are basic effects. That is not a basic effect.
So
that's not a basic effect, Eddie. That's an effect that shows up in a set.
well, yes, I completely understand that, and I know that
Yeah.
for a fact. However, when it comes to my side of things, how many decks do you personally get to see that actually have, when you're facing off against Warrior, how many of those decks are actually using that Berserker?
Any Warrior deck that you basically uses self-flagellation methods uses that card.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen a lot of Warrior use that card. It is most Warrior. I I've actually seen more warrior use self-flagellation, where basically doing damage to everything and to
Hmm.
themselves,
Yes.
more than warriors that don't, and they always use that card. So I've seen that card a lot, Eddie. I'm also saying I'm not disagreeing. I'm not saying it's a bad card. I'm just saying
I
it's
know
a
you're
bad
not.
card for Classic.
It's one of the cards that I could potentially see being in the nerf list.
Yeah, that's why I said
Honestly.
I think it should be nerfed for being a Classic card. But
Okay,
I'm going to bring up
so
the same. I'm going to bring up what I was about to bring up for effects like it and Warsaw Commander. Now that you have standard mode, there's nothing saying that effects like that cannot return in another set on another creature. And it'll be okay because those creatures will actually be phased out because now you're keeping balance because of standard mode. Just for Classic, it just doesn't work.
all right, so
And
we've got at least that card.
yeah, in
If
fact,
anything.
like I said, I would like to see that nerfed, but maybe in the next expansion, a card with the same exact effect come out.
Because I've got a couple of cards in mind that could be at least hitting the nerf list. I
Yeah.
just want to see if there's anything else that you could see that potentially could get hit.
I really didn't go deep into it because I was basically giving examples of cards like this. And another thing I was going to give out is pretty much, like I said, nerf the uber powerful effects that don't fit the classic cards, but then you can use those same effects and put them on new creatures that come out in new sets. And there's nothing to say that in the future, different creatures can use similar or the same effects as creatures in the past. Because in your see where I'm going with this is now that you have this overall change in perspective with the competitive game, there's nothing to say that a creature with Warzone Commander's old effect cannot return to the game. Especially if things like frothing Berserker.
All right, so would you say the Druid combo of Force of Nature and Savage Roar need nerf?
I I really wasn't going in too much into the nerfing aspect. But remind me what they do. I think Savage Nature is the one that ups them.
Savage Roar gives +2 to every creature on board. Force of Nature summons you 3 2/2 charged Trinits.
Treants. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
something needs to
it's a
be.
9 cost
Yeah,
play, but
yeah. Savage Roar by itself. I think Savage Roar by itself is a good card. Because there's a lot of cards in other classes that do the same thing. But again, here's the problem. The problem card probably is Force of Nature. It's not Savage Roar in this case. It's Force of Nature. And I know that the Treants die, but when you're looking at that combo, it's just way too powerful for Classic. It's just way too powerful for your core set. I could see that being a card in a set. It might just be a card that needs to be nerfed altogether in Classic. Um,
also Big Game Hunter.
I'm torn on Big Game Hunter, and here is why. I'm just going to say it. I'm not sure whether Big Game Hunter's effect is really so overly powerful as to overshadow other things, other expansions. And I know a lot of people. There's people that use Big Game Hunter. I'm kind of off and on about him, so it really doesn't affect things as much. It also is a good because it has the basic effect of countering big things in all future sets. So I think looking at it that way, Eddie, I don't think Big Game Hunter needs to be nerfed.
Yeah, it's something that when I was watching the, because I watched Kriparian, and he mentioned Big Game Hunter needing a nerf because you have to play around him and have to be worried about you dropping a big creature and it being shot/killed. And I'm just like, for me, the Big Game Hunter is something that does get rid of those incredibly dangerous and hard to get rid of cards.
Big Game Hunter is a control card, and it's basically the perfect type of control card for a core set. And like I said, I don't think Big Game Hunter is as big a problem as people say.
I completely agree with you. That's just one of the reasons why I threw it out, is because I'm like, I want to see what you're going to think slash say.
And I'm going to reference something Ben Brode said. He says that a lot of people a lot of players are always saying this needs to be nerfed or this needs to be taken care of. He said, number one, they are very, very conservative. The team is very, very conservative about making changes. Number one, they're never going to make a card more powerful, but they're very, very conservative about nerfing a card. If it's getting nerfed, that means there's an actual problem with the card. But they said that they have access to all the actual information of how many times certain decks are played and how many times certain decks win. The example he gave about cards that really need to be nerfed, he gave the example of Undertaker. He said Undertaker was a card that really needed to be nerfed. And you looked at the original effect, and I agreed. It was way too powerful. And that's what I'm saying, is some of these classic cards are way too powerful to be classic cards going forward. But that's what he said, is sometimes people say certain things need to be nerfed, and then he looks at the data, and they're not being played as often as people said. He gave the example of Secret Paladin. He says a lot of people say Secret Paladin is being played 80% of the time and is winning hands down. He said the actual statistic is that Secret Paladin is normally being played 15% of the time. And that can vary depending on the month, to go up or down as much as little as 5, as much as 10. Which means it could be, at 1 month, it could be played 5% of the time. He said it's not winning as much as people think it is. And that's another thing. Mysterious Challenger is going to be going bye-bye in about a year's time, in about a year or two. In about a year's time, we won't see Mysterious Challenger anymore, so it's not going to be a big deal.
Well, you won't see it in standard play. You'll see it in your wild play.
We won't see it in standard play. And Eddie, here's what I think the beautiful thing is. I think, and I'm just going to say this, I really think your wide swath of classic nerfing is probably going to be the last big thing of nerfing you're going to see in a while. And the whole reason why is once you got classic down to basically be your core, and basically once you're only balancing for what's going to be in standard, and you're controlling the meta like that, really, you're not going to worry about it, because you can always just introduce something in the next set to balance out a card that's more powerful than you thought, and you always remember, well, that card is going to be disappearing in a year or two anyway. So there's really not it basically comes down to it is, I think once standard hits Eddie, we're not going to see as many, if any, nerfs. And if a card is really that much of a problem, I think the better issue would be not to nerf it, but to actually input a ban on it, so basically all of a sudden that card is not able to be used in standard, but you can play it in wild.
There's a very good chance for that to happen, and the ban idea is a great idea rather than just nerf. Because I was going to say, because we've seen with nerfing how hard a card can be nerfed.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I really think, I mean, I could be wrong, they could occasionally nerf something, but I really think that the class of them going through Classic, by the time we actually start Standard, that Classic nerfing will probably be the end of nerfing as we know it. Because this new Standard allows them to say, no, we don't need to do that. We can just do this or this instead.
Yeah.
And a lot of people brought up the question of, are they going to nerf things in Wild? And here's the thing: I don't think they're going to touch Wild. If they are like Wizards of the Coast when it comes to Magic: The Gathering, Wizards of the Coast do not mess with Wild with Legacy at all. Anything goes in Legacy, and you go into Legacy knowing anything goes. So I really don't think cards that are Wild specific, I don't think they're going to get nerfed. Once they leave Standard, Blizzard has no reason to worry about them. And people complaining in Wild, well, it's your own fault. Get out of Wild, or stop complaining and figure out how to deal with it yourself with all of the cards at your disposal.
Because there's so many cards that are leaving Standard that at least I know, at least for myself, I'm going to miss Keys and Mystic, because I loved having that card for whenever my opponent decided to go, I'm going to drop this secret and then drop this and in my turn, and I'm going to go, that's my secret now.
Yep.
Thank you! I loved doing that, because it was one of those things to where, instead of getting pissed off about certain things. Like if anything, with Secret Paladin. If you're a hunter and you are playing against paladins and fellow hunters and mages, and you're not running Flare to be able to deal with those secrets, you have no excuse for the problems that you set yourself up for. And that's another thing, too, with this whole meta change, is that people are saying, well, this deck is dead now, that deck is out and dead now.
Wham!
It's not even just wham, it's more along the lines of you just have to change, and I hate using this word. At the same time, it's the only word viable. Adapt.
Yeah,
You
evolve.
can adapt. You can evolve. It's not that hard.
It's like if my deck is not working, I figure out why the deck's not working. I change it. And here's the thing. Another thing Ben Brode said was it was awfully getting tiring because what not having standard is not having standard meant that there are always cards that are so powerful that there's no reason for them not to be in the deck. And he said pretty much there's no creativity. You're seeing the same thing over and over and over again. And basically, you pretty much saw the same decks being run all the time during championships. This is going to change it up constantly.
And that's another thing too, is that the thing is you'll still see as far as championship goes, you'll still see people who will see the top big meta deck that has come out, and people will copy it and net deck it, and they will still play it.
But here's the thing: the people at the very top, the champions, the top esports players, I hear they're a lot more welcoming of this because this actually keeps things fresh for them.
It does keep things fresh, because even for me, like someone who isn't exactly in the esports scene, but does follow along and still actually, keeps an eye on things, I enjoy fresh metas. I enjoy it to where when new expansions come out, stupid garbage, man, that I get to go, I'm going to test this, or I'm thinking about that. And just, like, with this new set standard thing that's going on, like, of course I'm still going to see my dragon decks. I'm still going to see, more than likely, Secret Paladin, because, oh no, it lost Avenge and Coghammer, and maybe Muster for Battle and Shielded Bot, it being little bit of a problem, but oh no, it lost just this little bit of stuff, but you still got a whole plethora of crap that you still have to go through. Oh no, certain things have just gone out and then. But if anything, like, I would love to see totems be played for Shaman more, because of how the meta has to evolve and change. But I don't see Shaman kind of sort of rising to the top at the start. I see it kind of sort of slowly building up.
Yeah. And that's, again, one thing that I bring up. And I'm going to bring up something, Ben Brode, because I'm going to get to the part, because I liked the interview I read. But this is one of the main parts I actually disagree with Ben Brode on, because I don't think he really understands how different. I don't think he's been around the actual scene and games like Magic the Gathering to really understand how this works. As I agree with him that basically things changing up and standard are going to keep things dynamic in the system. I agree with that. It's going to keep things dynamic. People are going to have to change. I disagree. I disagree with this statement. He basically said that having limited cards will encourage creativity, and people will be more creative in standard. But in wild, it'll become a lot more stagnant, and because people will always be running the same type of decks. I disagree. Here's why. It's going to be the opposite. Yes, standard is going to be more dynamic because the sets that are available for standard will be constantly evolving and changing. But if what we've seen in Hearthstone is any indication, and yes, technically this has been a standard season because it's including the same amount of years and the same amount of packs that would be available in any other standard season. We're just getting we're just getting last year's moved out of the way. But here's the problem with Standard, and you see this in any competitive scene. Standard will encourage creativity initially, but since pretty much everybody playing Standard is essentially playing to play ranked, in a way, people are going to start noticing what works, what doesn't, and then you're going to start seeing the same decks always happening. Basically, it's not going to encourage creativity. It's going to encourage the rush to basically find the decks that work in the meta at the moment, and basically a lot of people will be playing the same decks. It's dynamic in the fact that those decks will change from set to set and from season to season, but people are not going to be creative in how they build decks, because they're going to be building decks that more work in the current meta. I also disagree that it's going to be stagnant and wild. On the other hand, from my experience in Legacy, wild is going to be where things are going to get more creative. Ben Bro's wrong on this, and this is why. When you have more cards at your disposal, you can start. People in wild are going to be able to put some of these things together that were never created with that in mind. As the game progresses, wild is going to become more and more diverse. Wild players will become more and more creative because they're going to be coming up with combos that they could never have created in Standard. It will also allow decks that could never really survive in Standard, such as Totem. Totem kind of works in Standard now, but it will not work in Standard in a year. But Totem decks, basically, Totems have always been decks that kind of sort of work, but not really. As the game goes on, decks like that, where basically your archetypes are kind of scattered throughout different sets, will kind of come together, and you're going to start seeing archetypes and decks that would have never been possible ever in any Standard season. Basically, people will become more creative because they'll be going, "Hey, let's see if I put things together." Yes, you will see the same type of decks as they move out of Standard into Wild. Yes, you'll still see people running Death Rattle. Yes, you'll still see people running decks. There'll still be people running Secret War. There'll still be people running Mech Mage. There'll still be people running these top decks. Dragon Priest will still be running when it's not being ran in Standard. But the difference is, Eddie, because they have all of the cards to work with, they can take some of the cards that were not part of their original decks, and they can start experimenting with that. So basically, after so long a time, your various Dragon Priests, your various Mech Mages, your various Death Rattle decks, all these various decks, they may be similar in concept, but they will be different in design. Wild is going to be more. Wild is going to be the more creative metagame, whereas the Standard metagame is going to be more dynamic, but it's going to be more homogenous. If you understand what I mean.
I get what you mean, where Wild will be, because I would say within the first few months of this actual thing happening, if we don't have the new set released to us, I will say what you see in Wild is what we currently see now, which is basically it's stagnant currently.
Yeah, well, let me interrupt you. They have said they will release the new expansion at the same time Standard hits.
Okay, so
some of that expansion will be creeping into Wild right off the bat.
All right, that's good. With Standard, what we'll see right out the gates is a lot of experimentation. It's going to be, okay, I need to see if this works, or if that works, or if this and this, and see if all these little pieces come together and work properly. After, I would say, about a month or two, people will start to get in that groove of, okay, this actually works, this is what I'm going to see, this is what I want to play.
And so on and so forth until the next set comes out.
Yeah. I don't know exactly if Wild would be the more creative side of things. I mean, yes, you have everything at your exposure, but at the same time, while you may have everything at your disposal, you also still have that narrow scope in a sense because you only have so many slots in your deck that you can have.
Yes, but you're also now considering, it's always the thing of the new cards. I got a new card. How can I? Does this affect my deck? Can I use it to make it better? And yes, my decks are. I might have the same type of decks for years playing in Wild, but I'm always going to consider each new card that's coming out, and I may be going, this is better.
Yeah.
And my decks are going to subtly change. My Death Rattle deck subtly changes from set to set. My Beast deck changes from set to set. My Mech deck changes from set to set. And it's getting harder and harder for me to go, I want to put this in, how would I take out? But the fact of the matter is, they always change and they always evolve, even if it's incremental. And sometimes you're going to see things that's going, I remember this card from over here. I want to try putting them together, see what I get. I think there's going to be a lot more freedom to explore, I think, in Wild, because you have a lot more at your disposal in Wild.
And I think,
what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I get what you're getting at with there. And I think for Standard, it's more or less figuring out with what you have at your disposal, what can you do with it? Like, what exactly am I going to be able to take with W, X, Y, and Z, essentially. And going, alright, how can I make this deck function as best as possible? Yeah. I'm ready for the new expansion. I really am. I want to see what the new stuff is going to be because, I already know currently what I would say are going to be the top decks, at least starting out before the new expansion, before I get to see the new expansion. Currently, you're going to have Beast Warrior. You're going to have, or not Beast Warrior, Beast Hunter. Or Mid-Range Hunter.
You always have Beast Hunter. Beasts are fundamentally part of Hunter. It's never going to change.
I know, but what I was saying is it's going to be one of the more higher up decks still. Druid, you're still going to have combo. Mage, you're still going to have tempo. Paladin, Secret Paladin is going to stick around. It's only losing little bits. Priest, Dragon Priest is still going to sit at the very, very top because it is one of the top things. Warlock will be another one of the big classes because Handlock, and I can say that Zoo will more than likely still be around. It's just got to change in a little bit of the pieces inside for it to work. For Warrior, I would say that Control Warrior will be around, or potentially Fatigue Warrior being around. I can't put my thumb on Rogue, and I could say potentially for Shaman it would be Aggro Shaman, but Rogue is the one where I can't put my thumb on the button because it's so hard to figure out what you can do with that class right now.
Yeah. I would say even though it'll be losing like a totem or two, Totem Shaman can still do very, very well with this current meta.
It can.
I ran my totem deck twice last night, and I realized I was wrong. I'd really only be losing one totem, which would be my Vitality totem. But yeah, Vitality. I'm right?
I thought Vitality was basic card, or not basic, but classic.
No, Manatide is.
Let me see here.
Vitality was a new one.
Yeah, you're right.
Manatide.
You're right. Vitality Totem is right there on my list. I'm a ding dong.
and we're gonna have to wrap this up. But pretty much, I played 2 games last night, and it can really ramp up. It works like a dream. It's a wonderful deck. I love playing that thing. But not a lot of people play it.
I was gonna say I almost forgot the anything can happen OTK with Paladin. It can still work.
Murlocs are never going to go away, dude. Okay. Just to wrap this up, like I said, there is going to be an expansion coming out along with Standard. Now, here's the thing. We are going to get the extra deck slots before standard. So it could happen at any point. They could just drop the 9 extra deck slots on us. We have no idea when that's coming. It's just going to happen before standard. Standard is coming in, they said, in the spring. That means it could come as early as March. I'm going to wager it's probably going to come in April.
April or May.
I'd say early to mid-April. I'm probably going more mid here. Because they have a lot of fixes they need to make by that point. So Standard's going to be coming out, but at the same time Standard comes out, they are dropping a new expansion. But here's the thing, Eddie. They said this expansion is huge.
Ooh.
I'm probably going to say it's probably going to be one of the biggest expansions yet. They're pretty much going to make up for things. They're just going to drop a major expansion. This is going to be a big expansion.
I hope. I better start saving my gold and start figuring out how much money I'm going to potentially drop in.
I'll pre-purchase it.
Well, potentially.
But yeah, they'll be covering that. So yeah, it's going to be more than make up for the cards that are leaving. And we talked about type of decks, type of archetypes are leaving. Here's the thing: there's going to be parts of them still in there. And I would not be surprised to see some new mechs or see some new Death Rattle creatures. I really hope so. Maybe give a little bit new life for people who want to. They don't have all the old cards to really make those archetypes working, but maybe make a new version of it. It's going to be interesting what we're going to see from it, and hopefully this really brings some of the a little bit of old, a little bit new, and I think hopefully that's what we get here. So, I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. Anything else? As far as anything else you want to say real quick?
Other than just, I'm incredibly excited and ready for the new standard stuff, of course. I got nothing.
Okay. Well, as always, even though we don't do a Hearthstone specific series, whenever there's something major going on as far as the new expansions coming out or anything like that, Eddie and I will be sure to drop a video. We're sure to go over things like that. We also have a few things in mind. We're going to be rebooting, in a way, a few of our old series. So they're going to be coming back a little bit new, a little bit improved. One of them is going to be Let's Goof. It's probably not going to come out weekly as of yet, but it's probably going to be coming out some more. And Eddie and I are going to be doing some Hearthstone challenges on that, so you might want to check that out. And also, we're going to be trying to get out a new Critical Loading Era, a new podcast, and we'll be covering a little bit of Hearthstone news there. Not as big as this, unless they have a major announcement, but a little bit. We'll be keeping you updated as we learn new information. This is Bulbazak.
And I am Eddie Phoenix.
And this has been the Critical Loading Era podcast, and we will see you next week. Keep on gaming, everyone.